Hello and welcome to episode 112 of Stitched in Sweden. Today I'm going to be talking about my 2025 knitting plans and sharing with you how I go about setting my goals for the year when it comes to my making. So if you'd like to find me, I'm on Ravelry, Instagram, Love Knitting, or Love Crafts, Patreon, and where else? As Stitched in Sweden. And yes, let's just jump right in. Last time I shared with you my 2024 makes. In that episode I went through, tried everything on, gave myself a realistic kind of evaluation of whether or not I wear the garment, how I like the fit of it, the feel of the yarn, the wear of the yarn, etc., to kind of give me a good starting point for what I'll be looking to spend my time making in 2025. So one of the goals that I had for 2024 was to knit more for myself, and that might sound a little bit strange, like of course it's your hobby, or I don't know. I don't feel like I need to justify knitting for myself, but I did feel the need to put it out there as a goal for myself to say, yes, intentionally this year I am going to be knitting for myself, because sometimes I do feel that I tend to get not really stuck, because like it's not a bad place to be. I do enjoy knitting for other people, but sometimes I get into a pattern of knitting many things for other people, and then all the time that I'm spending knitting for other people, I'm thinking, oh, I really want to be making XYZ for myself, and then that always kind of getting pushed to the back burner. So in 2024, I made it a priority to prioritize those makes for myself, and I'm really happy with how that turned out. I think I had a good balance of projects for myself and projects for others. So in 2025, I'm starting out in the same way that I started out 2024, which is going through my stash. I did a big de-stash over on my Instagram, which usually I ship just within Sweden, but if you're interested to check it out, it's Stitched in Sweden _de-stash on Instagram. And I started out with looking through my entire stash and really being critical with myself and thinking, okay, is this yarn, you know, I really went through everything, holding each skein of yarn in my hand and thinking, is this something that I'm interested to carry with me into the next year? Is this a piece of yarn that either has a piece of yarn, sounds weird. Is this a skein of yarn or a ball of yarn or a scrap that has some sort of emotional significance or memory attached to it? Does it have a specific plan that's something I'm still excited to work on? Did it have a plan at one time, but that plan no longer fits with whatever it might be, my lifestyle, my taste in garment, or whatever, but it's still a yarn that I'm excited to work about? Those are the kind of questions that I ask myself moving into this big de-stash that I did. I'm happy to say that I have come out of that with 2 boxes of yarn, and I'm very happy with that level. People have all sorts of different sizes of stash, and I just read a interesting book that I found very insightful in terms of both stash but also just like stuff, people's stuff and what it means to them. And I think it's it came to me in a particularly important time of my life. I don't know, not important time of my life, but my grandmother passed away last week, and so reflecting on what stuff means to us, and what stuff we choose to carry through our lives is good food for thought, and is something that looking at my stash really has meant for me also. So I'm just gonna tell you what this book is called before I forget. It's called A Stash of One's Own by Clara Parks. I rented it from or borrowed it from the library, and I would recommend it. Whatever your stash size is, there's no judgment from me or shouldn't be from other people, but I'm happy with my stash right now, and I will show that to you. My box, and this box has only full skeins of yarn that I'm taking with me into 2025. And then I also have a box of the same size, which is scraps, partial skeins, leftover bits, and on the top there are a few small work in progress pieces, which includes 2 pairs of socks, 1 mitten, and a swatch. This video is going to be about my knitting plans for 2025, and for me, because a lot of my inspiration for knitting comes from the yarn itself, it only makes sense to start there, which is why I'm sharing my stash with you. Actually, 2 skeins of this top box that I just showed you are going to be traded with my friend when she comes to visit in about a month. These 2 beautiful skeins will be exchanged for 2 skeins of fingering weight hand-dyed yarn that she has. She also has a beautiful D-stash account, and her D-stash is institches.dstash, so that's at institches.dstash on Instagram. If you're looking for hand-dyed yarn, you should definitely check it out. I'm going to be trading with her these 2 skeins for 2 fingering weight hand-dyed skeins that I'm going to be using to knit a Pop Rocks sweater for Linnea, and also one for Nora, my middle daughter, because Eloise loves her so much and she gets so much wear out of it. It's held up so well, and it's just a really fun way to use a sort of wild skein of variegated yarn. And so I let Nora pick out one of the skeins from my friend Banka's D-stash. So definitely have a look there if you are also interested in some single skeins of stock yarn that could be used for a sweater. My daughter Eloise just turned 5, and her original Pop Rocks that I made in January 2024 still fits her after I extended the length of the arms, and I think it will probably fit her this whole year unless she really has a growth spurt, which could happen. So let's just go ahead and dive right in to kind of what I'm planning for this year. Right off the bat, I actually have already knit 1 sweater this year, the Stockholm sweater, and that was yarn that had been in my stash in 2024. It came into my stash in early 2024 or late 2023, and I had intended to knit it last year, but I didn't, and it still had some excitement in it for me, so I decided this is first up this year. Also coming off of 2024, where I knit many things in kind of neutral cream colors, pinks also, which is a neutral for me. I decided to start the year with this green sweater in this dark kind of olive color green, and I just really like how it turned out. I think it will be beautiful to wear all times of the year, but especially in the fall. It has really strong fall vibes to it, so that's already one that I've checked off my list. And what I've done is made a little notebook list here. I record all of my projects as I finish them in this notebook, and I've been doing that since 2022. So a couple years in there so far. I make other notes as well as the year goes by, but I always have a constant running list of what I've finished, who it was for, and I make a little indication with a dot if it was a knitted project versus sewing, because sewing can be like quite a production process, but for knitting, yeah, I don't know, I just indicate it with a dot. So Stockholm sweater, done, which was knit in Sagan yarn and Accessory silk mohair, and that is one yarn now that's out of my stash and happy being a new sweater. So up next is actually one that I didn't have on my list initially, but it came at a really good time when I was planning my makes for 2025, obviously, and that is a test knit. Now, I said that this was my first ever test knit. I think I did actually a test knit quite a few years ago. I maybe have done 2 test knits actually when I really think about it, but it's been many years since I have done a test knit. I thought that it would be actually a really fun way to kind of get involved in the knitting community in a different way than I typically am involved, which is, yeah, recording YouTube videos and yeah, my Patreon account. So I applied for Vert Knit, her test knit. She is a Portuguese knitwear designer, and she has designed the Cardi jumper and the Milady's dress. Those are 2 patterns anyway that are on my radar. She has designed other patterns too, but I know that those 2 are quite popular. And she has now designed the matcha jumper. And I saw this come up as a test knit opportunity, and I applied and I got it. So this is my first version. I will be making another version of it too with some other yarn that's ready for me to pick it up right now, but my first version is knit in her original yarn that she designed the pattern in, which is actually, it's the original base yarn, not the original mohair, but this Olivia yarn, it's number 12. It's 50 grams for 350 meters, and it's 55% wool and 45% cotton. This is the name of the yarn shop where it comes from. They shipped to me here in Sweden. From Portugal, they ship around the world with no problem. So this is kind of a little bit of a unique yarn in terms of the weight of the yarn. It's quite a thin, like very light fingering, if not lace weight yarn, and it's a cotton wool blend. So this yarn in combination with a silk mohair, which I'm using Cicia Vivienne, which is a 70% Super Kid mohair and 30% silk. Both of these yarns I purchased at a discount for the test knit. This one I purchased with the discount for test knitters, and this one I purchased at the shop that I work at with my employee discount. It makes a really beautiful fabric. It's similar to a fabric that you would get if you held together a fingering weight merino, like Knitting for Olive merino, with a silk mohair, but it's even lighter and almost not airier per se, but it feels lighter in, yeah, weight. And I think part of that is because there are more meters packed into, yeah, I mean, the yarn is a lighter weight, it's thinner. So this Knitting for Olive, for example, has 250 meters in 50 grams. So this has a full 100 meters more in 50 grams, but it's still knit at a similar gauge. So it's just, I don't know, it's really beautiful, floaty and lightweight. This is going to be the matcha jumper, as I said, and I'm knitting this one for my sister. It has an interesting shoulder construction that's kind of a continuous saddle shoulder setup. I don't know what to call it really, but it's really beautiful. It has nice little details, and I think it's going to be a really well-fitting sweater. She has a lot of information on adjusting fit and what to do if your row gauge is off, and that kind of detail put into the pattern, which I really appreciate. And something that I haven't seen before is that she includes adjustments for a broad back or like wide shoulder adjustment, which is something that I always do in sewing patterns, but have not come across in knitting before. So that will be something that I'll definitely be exploring in my second version, which will be for me. So that yarn has recently come into my 2025 box of yarn for this sweater and for this test knit, even though I will say my initial plan this year was that I felt like I was not going to be purchasing any more sweater quantities of yarn until I had knit through the sweater quantities that remained in my stash after I had done my de-stash clear out and was left with yarns that I really still was excited to knit with. But this was kind of a little exception because of the test knit. Me from the future is here to say that this beautiful yarn arrived tomorrow in this video. But I just wanted to pop on and add it to my 2025 plans because this is destined to be my second version of the matcha jumper from Vertknit, and this yarn was kindly provided for the test knit by Cardiff Cashmere. This is Cardiff Cashmere Classic. It is 100% cashmere in the color number 517. And it is 112 meters for 25 grams. Technically, I think it's classified as a DK weight, although to me that's very much fingering. I think because of its slightly loftiness to it, or like a little bit fluffiness, you can knit it at a looser gauge, and that works well. So this is knit on 3.5mm needles, which is potentially a US 4, and it matches the same gauge that I am using for the matcha sweater, which is a 22 stitch and 28 row gauge. And I will use these to knit my second version of the test knit for me. Okay, let's get back to regularly scheduled programming, or whatever we want to call it. The next thing on my list, these are not going to be in particularly the order that I will knit them in necessarily, but just in the order that they come up in this box. But next up is yarn that I have been meaning to knit with also since last year, and this is Knitting for All in Merino in the color Cloud or Sky. It is intended to be the Cardi jumper, also from Vertknit, and I am going to knit this with a silk mohair, which I have not yet purchased, and I'm going to have pearl buttons on it. I think it's going to be beautiful and classic. So that is my intention with that, and I would like to do that earlier in the year because I missed it last year. It's so dry. I've been a little bit sick, and now something on my list that I have had in my box of yarn since last year, but then kind of fell out of love with it for a while, but now I'm kind of excited to knit with it again, which is why I kept it around, is this Pearl Soho Good Wool. And I have 3 skeins of this. This is a 100% Andean Highland wool. It's undyed, and this is the color Driftwood Gray. It's considered I think it's considered a sport weight. It's 383 yards for 100 grams. So to me, actually I think even online maybe it says DK, but to me that's much closer to a sport. The third one is balled up, and I've knit a swatch. This was originally intended to be the Fleur cardigan from Sari Nordlund, but I don't think that it will become that. And the reason why, even though I think it's a really beautiful cardigan, I think after kind of a critical evaluation of my makes from this year and what I'm enjoying wearing and knitting, I don't think that's going to be the right pattern for this yarn. So I am planning on holding this double with a mohair There is a color from Accessory silk mohair, which is just my favorite mohair. It just is. I don't have it yet, but we sell it at the shop that I work at, and it's color number 2, I think, and it's called Greige, and I think it fits this very well. My intention is to knit most likely it will be a dropped shoulder design. I really like the fit of this sweater, which is the porcelain sweater from Le Knit, and I think I'm coming to appreciate that dropped shoulders are my preference in terms of wear, even if they're not my preference in terms of knitting. So I might hold this yarn a little bit longer in my stash to wait until the pattern that's right for it comes out. I think there's a few that I've been seeing teased on Instagram lately that this might become. There's no reason that I feel a need to rush into it, but yeah. I haven't swatched that with the mohair yet, so I'm not exactly sure where I am on the gauge. It could potentially become the Lakes pullover by Ozetta, which is one that I have on my list as a potential sweater that I would like to own. If we think about smaller projects, I have a few planned for this year, but smaller projects are something that tend to be something I don't knit so much anymore because I am very into sweater knitting. And this year, because I do have sweater quantities I would like to get through while I'm still excited about them, there's not going to be too many small projects, but they're also ones that I'm kind of reserving for. They're allowed to come up when they feel like it, and I'm allowed to buy yarn for them. I'm not like restricting myself from buying yarn either. It's just like I am excited to knit with the yarn that I own. This is leftover yarn from this exact sweater. It's Tin Pergint in color 2641 for this, I think it's called Beige Melange, and I guess that would probably be heathered beige or something. And then 2652, which I don't remember what the color is called, but it's also like a marled medium brown. And then I have 2 colors of Vernis, which is the Super Kid mohair from Delirium Natura, and I have hopefully enough left over to make a pair of colorwork mittens that I'm planning on knitting maybe soon, maybe not, because now that my test knits have come up, those are going to be taking priority. The mitten that I have those leftovers kind of reserved for is the Judith mitten by Maya Åkerström, and that's called Vanten Judith, which is in Swedish. I think that this particular pattern might be only in Swedish. Yeah, it is, but that's okay for me because I speak Swedish. But I think that also Google Translate or Translate app on your phone is such a useful tool nowadays that you can just hover over a pattern with the camera and get a pretty good translation if you don't speak Swedish and would like to knit a mitten like that. The colorwork mitten, and I think this kind of soft colorwork that I love so much in this sweater will be beautiful in a pair of mittens. And I don't have a pair of mittens with mohair in them, so I'm interested to see how that affects the wearability of them, the durability, and the warmth. In the winter here, it's often too cold to wear knitted mittens on a daily basis if you don't have some kind of liner. But yeah, on the early side of winter and the late side of winter, it is definitely mitten weather. So speaking of mittens, I am also excited to knit another pair of the Alma mittens from the same designer, Maya Åkerström. And I am planning on using this leftover heavy merino from Knitting for Olive in the color Charcoal. And I'm going to pair that either with this local 100% organic wool from Jämtlands 4, which is the region the sheep in the region where we live. This is 200 meters. I think it's probably 100 grams. I think it could work well with this black. So I will either knit those together or this Moods of Colors, which is a Corriedale DK, and I think that this could also make a beautiful pair, and potentially I have enough to make 2 pairs, but also I might be reaching my interest in knitting mittens after I've knit a couple pairs, and I'll definitely be reaching my capacity for knitting mittens, but they're also great gifts to give to other people. So if I'm enjoying knitting them, I don't see a reason to stop. Another project that I actually have currently on my needles that I'll share in my next regular episode is another yarn that I had in my box of yarn from last year, and I've been wanting to knit it for a while, and I'm still excited to knit it, so I thought best get this on the needles directly. I started this right after I finished my Stockholm sweater, and this is the classic sock from Spun Right Round in the color Rust. It's a semi-solid and it's really quite solid. I have 2 skeins of this, which is 438 yards per 100 grams. It's a superwash merino, 100% superwash merino. And I have 4 skeins of Bernice in the color Badane, B-A-D-I-A-N-E. That's not how you pronounce it, but I have 4 skeins of this rust colored yarn, and I'm pairing these together to make a vest number 7 from My Favorite Things Knitwear. I went back and forth for so long on what pattern I wanted to use this yarn for, and I think one of the reasons I didn't knit it last year was because I just was really playing with the idea of if I would have enough to knit a sweater or knit a cardigan with it. And after this year of running into the situation a few times, or last year running into the situation a few times where I played yarn chicken and lost, and I know that I can't get more of this yarn, I decided to take the safe route and go with a vest, and I will have leftover, which I hope to find something to use that with at the time that it presents itself, maybe a hat. Because I gave my sister my orange rust colored mohair hat because it was a little bit too light in color for me and kind of just blended in to my skin, but I think like this is a little bit darker and might work better for a hat if I have enough for a hat left over after my vest. I haven't actually knit the vest number 7 before, but I have one which was knit by my friend, and she gave it to me because she didn't want it, and she was giving it away and said, do you want this? And I thought, I don't know if I wear vests. This isn't really a color that I wear very often because it's kind of like it's definitely like a blue gray, but I love this vest and I wear it quite regularly. Not as regularly as this sweater, but I wear it in the winter with a cream colored turtleneck underneath most often, and I have gotten a lot of wear out of it, and so I thought, you know what, why reinvent the wheel? Maybe I would enjoy having a darker color or just another color vest, so I decided to use my rust colored yarn for that. So that's already on the needles. So next we have the zipper sweater light from Petite Knit. I'm sure you've seen this sweater. It has a tall neck with ribbing, a zip that's like quarter, I think it's called a quarter zip. I used to think it was called a 3/4 zip, but that doesn't make sense. So I think it's called a quarter zip, but also the zipper is quite long. I would call it like a 3rd zip. Anyway, it's a style of sweatshirt that I enjoy wearing, and I thought it would be nice to knit it as a sweater. I have this yarn in my stash and I've had it for a few years because I bought it on a trip to Oregon to visit my college friends while Nora, my middle daughter, was not super old. I've had this in my stash for a little while. It is a beautiful pink color that I like. It's called Pasture Rose. It is O-Wash Sport, and it is a 100% machine washable certified organic merino. It doesn't say superwash, but I'm guessing that it is some kind of process, but something tells me that I'm remembering that this is a little bit of a friendlier process. I'm not sure. I'm definitely feeling myself moving away from superwash yarns more and more, but with the few that were still left in my stash now, when I'm still excited by this color, I'm still excited by the possibility of this project, so I'm gonna knit it now, which is my plan for this year. So starting to get a big pile over here, but I'll just show you that I'm planning to knit this with as the zipper sweater light. I have 4 skeins of this, 304 yards, 278 meters in 100 grams, and I'm going to pair it with this silk mohair, which is color number 69, and I think that's going to make a really beautiful sweatshirt-like sweater. I think that will probably, I don't want to put a timeline on things, but like I want to knit it early-ish in the year. In this box I do have a few, like this is a partial skein, but it's still like nice and it still could be useful for something. That's why it inspires me in a different way than like a full scrap yarn, which is why it's not in my scrap box, even though it is a leftover bit. This is another one. No current plans for this Bernice, but it does match pretty well with this La Mana Como that I received as a gift for Christmas from my friend Andrea. This is a super fine merino. It's 25 grams, 120 meters, and I think that this could be really beautiful as a pair of gloves. I think that if I do make a pair of gloves, I might hold it together with mohair because I think that could make it a little bit more robust. I haven't finalized that plan yet, but I did knit gloves once before. It was one of the first projects actually when I got really into knitting that I did, and I really got a lot of wear out of them and I really liked them. It's not as daunting of a project as it kind of has a reputation of being, I think. So this might be what I use these skeins for this year. Could also work as a hat, but I think like something like gloves is quite appealing for me for these, so that's what I'm thinking. There's a few more skeins left in my box, and the ones that are left honestly don't have strong plans connected to them, so I don't know that I'm really gonna share them. I'll share one more that like may happen or may not. I have 4 balls of Drops Bell, and this is the color number 26. I might use this to make a summer bag like the Breeze bag from Petite Knit, but it could also become some kind of tea, or it's just nothing really strongly planned for this yet, so I'm gonna leave it in there, but this is still a yarn that I'm interested to knit with. And like I said, I still have a few other ones in here. This beautiful yarn, also from Andrea last Christmas, that is just gorgeous, that I would like to knit into something, but it hasn't, I don't know what it wants to be yet, but it's still exciting for me, so that's why it's still in my stash. I have a couple of skeins of Stress Knits sock yarn, and this is the color Palm Lines. This is going to be paired with one of the figuring weight variegated yarns that will be entering my stash when I make my trade with my friend. or this one. These are options for pairing to make the Pop Rocks sweater. And then I have a few hopeful skeins of like fingering weight that I would like to become socks, like this beautiful one. But I'm just at the moment not loving sock knitting, so it's not what I'm gravitating to. And I think also because I don't have like the ideal sock needle situation. I use Hiya Sharp's interchangeable needles for everything that I knit except for socks, because the interchangeable Hiya Sharps in the sock sizes, they use a smaller cord. It's called like the mini connection instead of the small or the large. I have a few of the large needles, but I have like an adapter so they work with the small cable. And the mini ones I have separate cables for, but I find that I don't particularly like knitting socks with those needles because they're too sharp. I really like a sharp tip for knitting in general, but the Hiya Sharps in those smaller sock knitting sizes, it's too sharp, like it pokes my finger in an uncomfortable way. But I'm having a really hard time finding the Hiya Steel, which is the non-Hiya Sharp sizes for socks, like 2mm, US 0, a US 1, which is a 2.25, and a 1.5, which is a 2.5. I think those, yeah, 3 sizes. I'm having a hard time finding those in steel fixed or steel interchangeable. But I would like to switch those needles out if possible. And I don't know if that might get me back into sock knitting, but I don't know, it might not. So those are the plans that I have yarn for. Now there are a few plans, of course, that I don't have the yarn for, that I will be acquiring over the course of the year, or thinking about like if those plans are still exciting to me when the time comes to knit them, or if I've moved on from them and want to knit something else. So I would really like to knit a hood. It's definitely very trendy right now to have the Sophie hood, for example, that Petite Knit came out with. I think that's a really nice pattern. I'm currently knitting one for a sample for the shop, and I think that that simple design with garter stitch is appealing. I also really like the look of the Alex hood from Knitting for Olive, and there's one other one that I sort of like the look of, but it sits farther back, and I don't think that's gonna be the look for me. Why is a hood appealing to me? I struggle a lot with my relationship with hats. I don't like wearing hats. They squish my hair. It makes my curly hair flat and staticky, and I mean, it's just not enjoyable to wear for me. I don't like the way that I look in them with short hair because like not very much hair sticks out of my hat, and it's just a whole thing. I think the hood is a really good alternative. I wear my hood on my jacket often in the winter as an alternative to a knitted hat. So I think having a knitted hood would be a nice in between. As I say, I'm looking at the Alex hood and I'm looking at the Sophie hood. I'm planning on using the deep burgundy color from Sandnes Garn, either in double Sunday or Sunday. It depends which pattern I decide to do. And it also depends then if I will be, I still have to decide and think if I'm going to add a mohair to that. Cicia Vivienne has a quite nice, slightly brighter burgundy color. There's one that's definitely like more purple, like eggplanty purple, and then there's one that's a little bit more of a wine color, but it's a little bit brighter, and that could work too, but I haven't decided yet. So that's my hood plans. I'm also interested in working with the Japansk Bomull again, which is the Issayer yarn that I knit my French market bag from last year. I thought that was really fun to work with, and I would like to use it again. I don't know if I'm gonna knit a second French market bag, and if I do, I will try to find a way to make it a little bit different than the first one. Probably playing with the size a little bit, but not knitting the largest size, because I think that is too big for my taste. But probably playing with the size a little bit and maybe adjusting the stiffness of the lining so that it's a little bit more of a structured bag could be an option. Or knitting a different bag, but I don't know if I love the Florence bag enough to knit that. I just haven't decided yet. I might knit that using color 59 that I knit last year if I pick a different pattern other than the French market bag, or I will use the pink color, which I think is number 39. So that's another project on the horizon that I will be maybe acquiring yarn for if at the time that I'm ready to knit it, I'm still excited to do that. Then I have a few other sweaters that are just sort of on my list for 2025 as possible knits. And some are more concrete than others, and some are just sort of ideas. So the Esther sweater is one that I'm looking at as a possibility from Petite Knit. Legs pullover I mentioned already from Ozetta. The Monday sweater is an option potentially for my re-knitting of my Colette pullover yarn. I started undoing that project and come to realize that I've made a bit of a mess of it when I was knitting it, because I forgot that I had run out of one of the mohair colors and had alternated in a different mohair, which kind of makes it a nightmare to undo. I might need to buy a ball of each of those yarns additionally in order to get another sweater out of that, but I think it will be worth it. Might be a Monday sweater, but if I go ahead and buy an additional ball, I'll have more flexibility with the design and might go for something more like a drop shoulder sweater. I have some other ideas that are just looser ideas, not just assigned to a pattern yet. I'm interested in a dark brown sweater, potentially the Coffee Date, which is a pattern from a new to me designer. Okay, Samantha Gurin design. The Coffee Date sweater, I think, started out as a neck pullover, and now it's also in a sweater design. And I think it's quite simple in its design, but I think it has a nice texture. It looks like it has a good fit, and this could be an option. This is a drop shoulder pattern that I think could be nice to just try out a different designer, support a smaller designer, and I think it might look pretty in dark brown that I don't yet have. But I really like I think it's color number 34 from Accessory yarn in their silk mohair, so I would probably use that if I'm going to knit something like that. And then I also would like to knit a red sweater this year, which I am expecting the yarn for my red sweater, which is going to be my test knit. I'll share more of that next, but that's going to be a bright red sweater, which was on my list at the beginning of the year, and then things kind of fell into place for that, which is really fun. So yeah, those are kind of what I have brewing in my mind in terms of plans for this upcoming year. Nothing is really set in stone, because even with the yarns that I have designated patterns to, it might be that those still change, but right now I'm feeling really good with those plans and with that yarn that I have. So I'm going to try to make those happen, and yeah, as I said, turn them into sweaters that I'm excited to wear while the yarn is still exciting for me to work with. And otherwise I will be maybe knitting some things from my scrap box, and maybe as the year progresses and I start to fill up that box with leftover bits from these projects, I'm also planning on bringing some of that yarn to the preschool that my children attend. They might have use for it in the art room there, if not destashing it as well. So I think that brings us to the end of this episode, and I would love to hear what you have on your plans or on your radar for 2025, and if you also think about some goals or making plans for the year, or if you just take each item as it comes. So with that, I will say goodbye and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.